The shadow is the effect, is bigger than the object itself. That's really what I was looking for. So when we are doing paintings, we always want to have the effect more important, the lighting more important, anything more important than the objects themselves. Even when you look at a Rembrandt painting or a Sargent painting, it's usually Vermeer, it's usually the way light works. Now that's the problem with the painting that you were working on, the portrait, because you just had a portrait sitting there on a black background, which kind of looked like a Sears backdrop, you know. That's not interesting. And you're very concerned with trying to render the person in the process, you're losing the whole painting process. Now, like this spider one, you sit there and you go, oh, wow, ingenious, you know. And it was ingenious because it was the week of the homework that she saw it and she said, oh, there it is. You know, it's not just your typical thing. We admire people who are artists. What are artists? They see the world in a different way and share it. Not just the way, you know, you can see the world in a different way and hold it in and they'll call you crazy. But if you share it, like Salvador Dali or somebody else, share it in such a way that other people get it so that they no longer can pursue their life without thinking about that moment. I guarantee you, after seeing that painting with that spider in there, you will no longer look at a spider shadow the same way. It immediately tells you, don't look at the spider, look at the shadow. We look at Van Gogh, we don't really, you know, necessarily admire the way he painted. Some people do, some people don't. But what's amazing is that he gives us a new way of looking at things. And so when we look at the night sky, we wonder, what was he thinking? When you look at his sunflowers, you go, what was he thinking?
Yep. All flat to me.
When we critique paintings in here, I go, what are you thinking? Because what you're thinking is more important than the finished product. And what's important when you're doing work is to make the viewer think. It's not what you were thinking that's really important. It's whether or not the viewer is getting the message. If you're thinking one thing, and that's why I say, what are you thinking? And if you're thinking one thing, and I'm seeing another, you're not communicating. But if you're thinking about something, and I'm getting it, like that spider, it's like, I know, immediately I knew what she was doing. Thank you for sharing. I will never take a spider for granted anymore. Look at how awesome that is, right? And she barely painted. She did that painting an hour before class. An hour before class. She went to go visit her friend, and this is in Reading, went in the pool in the morning for therapy, saw the spider on the edge of the pool, got up and said, I gotta go home, class is in an hour. She went home, did that, really rough, came in. Did I sit there and go, well, you didn't paint it very well? I don't care how well it's painted. What I care about is whether or not I got it. And I got it loud and clear. I get this really loud and clear. Really cool. You did a nice job on that. Okay, next up. We only have 2 paintings here? Oh, yes. Whose is this? Chris. So did you hang these up and...
Yeah, took a picture.
Why'd you take a picture? You know how I gasp when you say you took a picture and copied it? Because I'm not really like in...
did that too.
No, she didn't. She made it up. She just really, because she had it burned in her... It was like, you know, the thing is, now let me ask you that picture, because we shared it very quickly. Did any of you actually notice if whether or not it was painted very well or not?
No, because the effect.
Did any of you notice to see whether or not all the feet were in correctly and whether or not it was actually, you know...
Didn't count that.
Did you notice the spider wasn't even painted? It was like the effect was so big that you kind of like didn't really pay too much attention to the rest. So like if you set something up at home and you go, oh, I like that, and try to memorize it and coming back in, you could actually kind of recreate it. Even if it's not correct, the idea will still translate. So, but I get you work from photographs, that's perfectly fine. But don't underestimate the power of what the brain can memorize. I think you did well here. The issue that I find with these here is, and I found that with yours a little bit too, and one of the reasons that we need to watch out with this, see how hard the edges are? And you get hard edges like that when you have a really bright light. And when your light is really, really bright, you get hard edges, and those hard edges make us stop. And so what happens is that when I'm looking at this, immediately I don't go anywhere. I'm focused on those hard edges. And that's because that's the way the brain focuses. So when I'm looking at you right now, I'm looking at your eyes and you're in focus. Okay?
But if we want good shadows, we have to have bright light.
No, you have to have light. And if you put in a silk in front of your light or something like that, it subdues the light some so that you don't get hard edges. Now, what would have been even more interesting is to eschew the edges and to eschew the shapes so that you didn't end up with an exact rendering, but actually where the shapes become a little more drawn out. You know, try to get them to feel like they're hitting and drawing. You know, we could still tell the shape of things, but not have them redundant. The problem with that is that if you have an object here and an object here and they're exactly the same, the viewer is like not sure what to look at. Okay? So you want the viewer to sit there and look at one or the other, and preferably you would have soft edges on the object itself, hard edges on the top of the object as a shadow, and then have it kind of drawn out and just kind of give, you know, how that shadow kind of morphs and abstracts. Then it becomes kind of even more of an interesting shadow, not just a rendering of that. And the reason why I say that is because the shadow here looks very similar to a scissor there, and they're exactly kind of the same. So they're kind of competing. You're not quite sure for a second which one is a scissor. And what would have been more interesting is that definitely have the shadows be prominent, but have them in such a way that they're not mirroring the object as much. And this is why you need to kind of play with the lighting effects so that the shadows become something else. So you don't end up with two things at one time. That's one reason why I am not in love with paintings of reflections. They're boring in paintings. You never really see a painting in history that's great by Turner or Moran or your Bierstadt or Monet. That's a mirror reflection like you see in cameras. You know, sometimes you see those calendar pictures that are so sweet you want to puke. That mirror reflection is just a redundancy of what's there. There's no other possibility. It's just the same thing flipped over. Boring. Okay? In a painting, having an object and then having that object cast a shadow that's more abstract, but yet you still can tell what it is more interesting. Not that it's wrong, but it could be better. See, what would be interesting, again, you know, like I said, look at things differently, like you've never seen it before. It's like throwing a shadow on a wall of a pair of scissors that you knew were a pair of scissors, but you didn't know that scissors could cast that kind of shadow. Then you're starting to talk like an artist. You're morphing or abstracting reality. And you're like going, yeah, that scissors is really cool, but look at the shadow. Look at what the scissors did with the shadow. That's that little, put more into it, that little bit more. That makes it exciting. Whose is this?
Mine.
And is this the right direction?
Yes.
Okay, so what were you thinking?
Rock, paper, scissors.
Rock, paper, scissors.
And I think I should have blurred out the scissors. I did it on
Well, this is perfect example. This is like, oh. I'm going to take a photo of this one.
Really?
Yeah, this one's going to be like, okay, rock, paper, scissor. Now remember how I was talking about, here she has the rock. Look at that. Look at the shadow. The shadow isn't quite the same as the rock. It's not a remake of the rock. In fact, it's blurred in such a way that we can tell that the light's somewhat askewed. The paper's really outstanding because the shadow isn't a duplicate of the paper at all. It actually has a different morphing to it. And the way that you situated it, it in itself is interesting to see how the shadow and the object itself are playing together. And even the rock throwing a little bit of that shadow across the paper ties the rock onto the paper, which is extraordinary. Then we go to the scissors here, and the scissors, we could tell it's the scissors, but here you kind of lost it. Like you said, the scissors are a bit hard. And those two scissors are fighting each other. You know, the two objects are. These are working together. You just could sit there all afternoon and watch how the light's playing on there. And making holes in the paper was ingenious because you kind of took a flat plane, which could be quite boring, and the effect of light coming through the paper out there, you are like on fire. I mean, it's just, huh?
It looks like a book.
Well, it doesn't have the hard edges that it would have a book. But the story is fabulous. The renditions are fabulous. The shadow effects are fabulous. Really, I mean, you really, really good job. You like doing these kind of things?
Yes.